Hi, Acadiana. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Welcome to the Tuesday edition of Let's Talk Tropics. We've got a beautiful day here in Acadiana after kind of a rough night last night. Had a couple of severe thunderstorms, a few tornado warnings over parts of central Louisiana, but most of Acadiana unscathed when it comes to the severe weather. And now we're blessed with some beautiful conditions outside. In fact, look at the blue skies on our traffic cams. Temperatures are going to hold in the upper 70s to near 80 for daytime highs, but a bigger push of colder air is going to be sliding in later this evening, and you'll notice those breezes starting to pick up later in the day. And then overnight tonight, I think temperatures will fall back into the 50s and not recover a whole lot as we go into Wednesday, with afternoon highs expected to be in the upper 60s. So check it out on the national picture. You can see that massive low pressure area that was over southwest Texas this time yesterday is now well up into the western part of the Great Lakes, up there around Minnesota, trailing cold front. And then you've got some more moisture that's starting to pull in. And in fact, there over the central part of the Gulf of Mexico, that's a lot of leftover moisture from what was Tropical Storm Sara earlier this weekend. So it looks like we might get some flooding rains a little bit farther to the east. Notice how the rains are considerably heavier and more widespread than they were when they moved across the Acadiana area late last night and early this morning. But you can see from Alabama toward the Florida Panhandle, and a lot of that moisture is going to be lifting into Georgia coming in for the next several hours. So flooding rains are going to be possible there off toward the east of us while we start to enjoy a much more beautiful day. But you can see there over the central part of the Gulf of Mexico, again, right about in here, that is what's left of Tropical Storm Sara. So that moisture there is going to get pulled up ahead of the front and continue to move off toward the northeast. So that's why we're thinking there's more of a heavy rain event for areas to the east. Over the weekend, it looked like some of that might have been coming toward the Louisiana coastline, but now that the front has gone ahead and made its way through, it looks like most of the action is going to stay off to our east. Unfortunately, it's not a very good boating day, even though it's a very pretty day out there. Those winds are still kind of gusting in the seas a bit on the rough side, and I think those winds are going to pick up a lot more overnight tonight with that secondary front kind of pushing through. So wouldn't be surprised to see some pretty rough conditions coming up for the Gulf of Mexico, at least in our nearshore waters here coming up for Wednesday and Thursday. So let's take a little bit of a tour around the tropics. There isn't a lot going on right now, but we've gotten all the way down to the name Sara, which was the 18th named storm. And I'm still thinking that we might be able to squeeze one more out before the 2024 season is over. I'll show you a couple of models and explain the reasoning here in just a little bit. The Caribbean Sea, a very nice day. You got some thunderstorms there over the southern Windward Islands and an old frontal boundary that's kind of moving across the central part of the Atlantic Ocean. The front that has come through here last night is going to continue to edge southward down into the Caribbean Sea as that secondary push of colder, drier air starts to push in. So that front's going to stall over the central and probably the western part of the Caribbean. And sometimes you can get a little low pressure area to develop along the southern tail end of a frontal boundary. I was kind of watching the areas over the southern Windward Islands, but that doesn't look like it'll happen. But this next front that's coming in from the northwest through the Gulf of Mexico right now, once it gets into the southern part of the Caribbean Sea, there might be a chance of a low pressure area developing. Will that become the next tropical system? There's a little bit of a suggestion of that in a few of the computer models today. Not sure if it's going to get strong enough to get the name Tony, but if we do get Tony, that will be the 19th named storm of the 2024 season. But at this time, the National Hurricane Center is not expecting any tropical cyclone activity for the next 7 days. But the water temperatures over the western and southern part of the Caribbean Sea are still quite warm, and you've also got warmer waters that could still sustain some tropical weather farther to the east of the Windward Islands and then right off of the African coast. But the rest of the tropical Atlantic is starting to cool down enough that it would be a lot harder for a tropical system to get organized, especially farther out in the Atlantic Ocean. And that ocean heat content is still quite high there southwest of Cuba and then south of Jamaica and then also south of the Dominican Republic and over toward Puerto Rico. You've got some high-end areas of some high tropical cyclone heat potential. So again, if you're going to see anything develop during this last part of November, that is going to be the area where you're going to see the most likely development. At this time, if anything were to develop, most of the time they would kind of scoot off toward the northeast and head back out into the Atlantic Ocean. But if you don't have a strong enough trough coming here, you might see something kind of drifting a little bit farther off toward the west and heading over towards Central America. And of course, Central America does not want another tropical system after the tremendous amounts of rain that Tropical Storm Sara brought just last week and over the weekend. Wind shear is also starting to pick up a lot more, although there's some relatively low wind shear now over the western part of the Caribbean and even the southern part of the Gulf of Mexico. But as that front kind of pushes farther to the south, that high wind shear is going to be taking over a lot of real estate there over the western waters of the Caribbean and the southern Gulf. So development there wouldn't be very likely, but farther down the road, that wind shear kind of weakens once again over the southwest Caribbean. So that's why I'm thinking maybe there's still a chance we could squeeze out a Tony before this thing is all said and done for the 2024 hurricane season. So let's go ahead and get into the latest models. We'll take you out 10 days this time around, and the GFS has that front pushing way out into the Caribbean Sea, but you might notice there's moisture gathering there going into the middle part of next weekend. Yep, even another low pressure area right off the Nicaraguan coast. That takes us out to about November the 29th. So not this Friday, but the following Friday. That would be the day after Thanksgiving. And the possibility of a new tropical system, at least according to the GFS. That would be quite interesting to see. The Euro model also has that frontal boundary diving way down to the south into the central and western part of the Caribbean Sea. And then down there, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, Colombia, you see that moisture start to gather once again. Maybe a little bit of a hint of a lowering of pressures in that area coming up toward the end of that model run, which again would be going through Thanksgiving and the day after Thanksgiving. So the possibility with the Euro maybe buying on to some lowering pressures in that part of the region, but it looks like not quite as strong as what the GFS is suggesting. And by the way, the GFS has shown a bit of a low trying to develop there in the last 3 or 4 model runs. Canadian model, we'll let it start over here. You see that front diving way down into the middle part of the Caribbean Sea, and then once again you start to see a little bit of a moisture build here over the far western part of the Caribbean Sea, maybe even a little bit of a low pressure area trying to develop off of the Colombian coast. And the Icon model that goes out only 7 days also has that frontal boundary right there, continuing to push well out into the Caribbean Sea here. And then eventually you start to see a little bit of moisture gathering there over the western part of the Caribbean going into days 6 and 7. That would be toward the mid part of next week. And maybe even a little bit of a low pressure area trying to spin off the Colombian coast. At this point, not sure if that's going to be a monsoonal low or if we might be able to catch some kind of new tropical system developing over the far southwest portion of the Caribbean Sea. So there's still a bit of a chance, even though the global tropics hazard outlook for this coming week and the following week. Again, this is last week's numbers. The new model run will come down a little bit later this afternoon. Unfortunately, it's after Let's Talk Tropics is over. But I wouldn't be surprised to see in week 2, once we get the refreshed version a little bit later on, maybe a little bit of a blip there over the far southwestern Caribbean. So that'll be something to look out for as we go into Wednesday. One of the other things that I wanted to point out, remember way back, if you've been watching Let's Talk Tropics throughout the hurricane season, we had all these huge numbers that were being pointed at for the number of named storms over the course of the hurricane season. Some really robust numbers. And then we had, 3 tropical systems during June, and then everything just completely shut down all the way going into at least the first week of August. And I was sitting there going, wow, we're going to really have to play a lot of catch up to be able to get to some of those numbers that were being predicted by some of these Colorado State University, NOAA, and other folks that do these early season hurricane season forecasts. And back in the middle of the summer, I want to say sometime in August, I kind of put this graphic together starting with 2019 and going through 2023 to show the number of named storms that were forming after August the 1st. And I thought, man, we're really going to have to get a lot of named storms to get going to be able to come even close to some of those predictions. Well, the numbers that I have so far, remember, we could end up with another one, but there you go, 15 named storms here in 2024, and 10 of those were hurricanes forming after August the 1st, and more than half of those named storms formed in October and November. So we have a very bottom-heavy hurricane season this time around. Usually August and September are your busy months. But then when things started turning on once again in September, the thinking was, okay, well, that La Nina pattern kind of starting to kick in, thinking maybe we were going to get some extra storms. But it's really hard to believe that we had, I think, 8 or 9 named storms just during October and November, and there's still a possibility that we could add to that before the hurricane season is over, as we've got 11 days to go. So far we've had 15 named storms, and 10 of those were hurricanes after August 1st, and again, half of those developed during the months of October and November. So quite the unusual hurricane season, but it isn't quite over yet. Will we get a Tony? We'll have to wait and see how that all goes. Well, I hope you enjoy Let's Talk Tropics. If you do, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also turn on those notifications. And don't forget, you can hear my daily forecasts here at home on Big 102.1, Planet Radio 106.7, as well as Freedom 95.1. And between all of those broadcasts, please follow my social media pages, both on Facebook and X. Enjoy this gorgeous day. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. I will see you on Wednesday.